1, 2, 3, swing it.
Do you have an old sound tape or your favourite cassette tape that you want converted to CD or MP3 format? Do you need a demo CD, radio ad, a DJ or even a sound system for your wedding, birthday or special occasion? Then why not get in contact with KTR Records at 07931 152 448 or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We've been in business since 2004 and we also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, doublets and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, coming your way.
I was terrified about sharing the vulnerabilities of people with difficulties reading and spelling words. However, I can see the value in sharing, and I have taken the time to make some notes about this in my book, Dyslexic: The Silent Difference. You can get your copy now at www.a1tribe.com or amazon.com or amazon.co.uk. Thank you again, everyone, for your support.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
Or life chat like this?
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later, people will realize that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, you World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Oh, have we got a show lined up for you? Stand by.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time.
In fact, I'm doing what you all should be doing now. Share the stream live. Share it all over the world.
Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the street. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now I sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd shoot you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The accusations are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. time. I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not.
Now today I want you to join me and my roundtable team for another exclusive discussion. Yes, following the latest withdrawal of our guest speaker, we decided to look at the issues most affecting victims of wrongful convictions, police brutality, and innocents killed by cops. And my team this week consists of exoneree Christine Bunch, who I interviewed just over a couple of weeks ago, and advocates Yolanda McNair, Dee Martin, Stephanie Babb, Patrick Lane, and supported by my producer, Therese Gallagher.
Already did my time.
After our last discussions, we felt that there was more to bring to the table, so hold tight. Get ready for another exhilarating debate as we bring a new dimension to this great team of advocates. Please share this stream live, now, all over the world. You can get us live on www.worldjamglobalradio.com. You can grab us on YouTube or Twitter, Facebook Live, on Issues Today, on World Jam Global Radio Facebook, and on all of the, most of, if not all of, killed by cops, police brutality, or wrongful conviction, social media platforms available.
I wouldn't do it again.
Stand by.
My brain was so numb, I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd shoot you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time, already did my time. I paid for my crime, already did my time.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
Trying to cope with this living hell.
Stand by.
Trying to cope with this living hell. Yes, I am. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
Just making sure that I reshared it on Twitter as well. I normally forget Twitter. But yes, we are live also on Twitter.
Our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass.
We will be welcoming our latest
Temptation, but deliver us
deputy,
for thine is the
Christine Bunch, very shortly. Stand by.
Amen.
Just want to thank all of you who join us each and every week supporting us.
All those drive-by killers, stop them. It ain't about nothing.
An extra special shout out to my dear friend Vanessa Whirling,
Let me cast the first.
Doreen Moulton, I see you out here in Coventry, Paula Arietta,
Back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. And put down those knives, stop stabbing each other. Yeah.
we so love to have you guys on board. But stand by. We're coming up to you very shortly. Okay, first I just want to say that we do have our producer and our captain, TJ, Therese Gallagher. She's on the sidelines today. As you all know, she's recovering from her knee replacement operation. And although she is listening in and tuning in and supporting in spirit, she will not be physically contributing today. But we wish her well. We pray for her. We lift her up. In spirit, that she will get well soon and be alongside us right here on Issues Today. in the very near future. It won't be long now because she's really on a fast track back to recovery. We just hope that the recovery is a full and complete recovery and she has no more discomfort to her knee and she's able to maneuver and get herself around the house, especially so she can go off to look after that husband of hers who keeps trying to cause problems for her by scaring her and doing all sorts of silly things when she's trying to lay down and rest. But we love you too, Brian, so they're two of them need to just look after each other, really. But TJ is there. She does all the work that really makes this thing stick together and keeps everybody in line. But she's there in spirit, but she won't be contributing today. But our guest today, and I do believe we may be short of Dee Martin also, sister of Andre Gladden. Just prior to us going live on air, she's had to rush her young son to ER, and we're not fully aware of the circumstances at this moment in time. But we will update you if we have any information before the show is complete. And hopefully Dee at some point will let us know what's going on and whether everything's okay. But Dee's on her way to ER with her son right now as we speak. And as much as she'd love to be here with us, unfortunately, that takes precedent, and we all understand that. So she's also here with us in spirit. We like to send our best wishes out to Jerry Summers, former Chief of Idaho Police. He can't be with us today, but he will be with us, I think, on the very next roundtable. Jerry Summers is back with us, and so will Scott Russian, who is currently away mountain climbing or something like that. I was told that he was doing, which is absolutely fantastic for him. He needs to get away and just rest himself a little bit after some of the recent events that have taken place. And if we remember, after last week, he had just returned from the ruling on the Desmond Phillips case, as he's been supporting the Phillips family while he's been going through his own trauma with the loss of his own son. So we wish him well, and we hope that he's having a great time wherever he is. But nevertheless, we do have a fantastic roundtable team available for you today. Yolanda is here as usual. Stephanie Babb, who made her debut last week, and an absolutely fantastic spokeswoman, is also with us. Patrick Lane, as you know, ever ready, ever present, with a wise head on his shoulders and full of knowledge. He's also with us. But first and foremost, let us introduce our latest debutant to the roundtable team. It's a big, huge hello from all of us here on Issues Today to Christine Bunch. How are we doing, Christine?
Very well. How are you?
We're great. And it's an honor to have you on board with us.
Thank you. The honor's mine.
Well, if those of you that were listening to the show when we interviewed Christine, it was overwhelming. I got overwhelmed again and asked her. I think it was live on the show. I'm sure I did. And she accepted our invitation to join the roundtable team. But I've also got to set the record straight, because last week on the roundtable, I told you that me and my producer was having a hoo-ha about getting Stephanie Babb on board. And I was like, oh, no, do it now. And she was like, really, boss? And then I claimed credit for getting Stephanie onto the show. In fact, it wasn't me. I recalled it totally wrong. It was actually TJ who live on air asked Stephanie Babb to join the roundtable team, and she was willing to join it. So I needed to set the record straight, because TJ pulled me up on that. She said, boss, you didn't ask her, I did. And she was right. I didn't ask her. TJ did. So thank you, TJ. And I hope that I'm now back in your good books, because I've set the record straight. But going back to our debutants, let's talk about Christine first. Christine, just a quick recap, if you can. Tell the audience just a little bit about you and a little bit about your case. And the rest of the roundtable team will sit down in awe and ask a couple of questions as how they see fit. But just give us around 5-10 minutes maybe of you and your story, please.
I was a young single mother when I lost my 3-year-old son in a fire. Fire investigators decided in less than 2 hours that it was an arson, and I was charged with arson and murder. I was sentenced to 60 years, and I went to prison 7 months pregnant with my second child. It took 17 years for me to be exonerated. New fire science led to my exoneration, as well as an altered document that was discovered through the ATF file, stating that accelerant was found in my child's bedroom, when in actuality nothing was found in my child's bedroom. Wow. So it was a long fight, and it took a while to prove my innocence. I've been home 7 years. I run a nonprofit organization to help other people that have been wrongfully convicted and exonerated. And I do legislative issues all over the country to talk about changes we need within our judicial system. And I speak on behalf of the Innocence Project.
Amen. Well, listen, we are honored to actually have you on board on the issues today, Roundtable team. But just to really sum up some of the things that took place in your case, one issue, within 2 hours of your child, your 3-year-old son, being killed in that fire, the police turned up at the hospital and claimed that A, it was arson, and B, the arsonist was known to the family. Correct?
Correct. I had to list all of my family and friends and tell them everyone that could have had access to my home.
Wow. And then how many days did it take for them to actually go ahead and charge you?
I was arrested 5 days after the fire.
So within 2 hours, they were convinced it was arson, convinced it was done by somebody that was known to the family, and within 5 days, you were charged.
That's correct.
Okay. What I also found absolutely gobsmacking, left me speechless, and when I've shared this story with everybody, whether it be at work or because I love to go to the sauna and talk about what I do here on radio, and when I tell people about this story, this stops them dead in their tracks. The judge, while sentencing, during sentencing or before sentencing, said these words to you, that he believes that you got pregnant deliberately so that the court would feel sorry for you and give you a lighter sentence.
That's correct.
How did that make you feel? You're carrying your second child. You haven't even properly grieved for the loss of your first one. You're being charged and tried for the murder of the child that you lost, knowing that you were not responsible. You're having a baby which was not a replacement for your lost child, but at some point, at some way along the line, must have given you comfort that he was bringing a new life into this world. And you've got the judge saying that you've done this deliberately to try and cause an effect that the jury or the judge, the judicial system, would feel sorry for you, hopefully find you innocent or give you a lighter sentence. How did that make you feel?
First off, appalled that anyone would consider doing that. Secondly, it pointed out the fact that I am completely a woman, because no judge would ever say that to a man if his wife got pregnant, and that he was using that to try to get sympathy. So I think it really calls into question feminist issues and the fact that women are viewed by the courts differently.
That's a good point. That's absolutely a good point. And one of the things to point out from this, and we really want to salute this young man and take our hats off to him. Your younger brother dropped out of college to step up and be a father to your child while you'd served your sentence.
That is correct. And it was actually high school. He left 6 months before he graduated, and he worked 3 jobs and made sure that my child had everything and that he was there to see me every week.
You know, all I can say is what a great testimony you give when you talk about your story, your family, and what you now do. And especially, again, hats off to your brother. But, hey, we've got a whole roundtable team. Is there any questions that you guys want to ask, guys, as we welcome Christine onto the roundtable team?
Christine, this is Patrick. I just want to welcome you to the roundtable and to applaud you for and all of the people on the panel who take their pain and they transfer that into power. It's just amazing what so many of you are able to do. I'm so honored to have you here with us today.
Amen. I think Stephanie Babb was going to come in.
Yeah, I second that. I really appreciate your input. It sounds like you're incredibly intelligent and knowledgeable about this, and I am too honored to have you here. Thank you so much.
You know, maybe we should have done this when we started the round table. You know, introducing people like this one by one, because to be honest with you, I don't actually think that you guys realize just what a significantly important task you have before you, and the significance of your roles and the job that we are being called to do here. It's immense, absolutely immense. And I take great pleasure in personally, alongside my right hand, TJ, in handpicking every single one of you to join this as a parallel fight for the truth and justice, not just for your cases, but people who have gone through things like you have. It's absolutely a privilege and an honor for me to share this platform with you and give you guys an opportunity to share your truths and the truths of others that you encounter. So well done to all of you. Yolanda, from the first time, and I've interviewed Yolanda a few times now, but when you hear the story of Yolanda and her daughter Adesha, just prior to her 25th birthday, being shot by an off-duty police officer at a party that she had gone to with a friend, and the work that she does with Post, Protect Our Stolen Treasure. And then you've got the others who are not here today, so I'm not going to go too deep into them. We'll go deeper into them when they are on the show. But TJ, my producer, I want to honor her as well. The first show that we ever did with TJ, the forces that be removed the interview from the entire internet. It couldn't be found. The amount of interruptions and interactions and disturbances that we had trying to get that show out. And when I was looking for a producer to come alongside and support me with this show, it was a spiritual connection that was absolutely awesomely that I could not ignore when I encountered TJ. And we have been together for quite some time now. And I can't, without hesitation, I say, the best support network I've actually ever had in doing this show in the 5 years that I've been doing it. So I take my hat off to TJ for setting her pain aside, while she does present a fantastic support system, not just for the guests before the show, but she provides a support network for them long after the show is finished, checking up on them and making sure that they're okay and they've got through the experience, and there's no unanswered questions. So great work, TJ. Love you so much. And
thank you so much, boss. Thank you very much.
I just really felt the need to share that with everyone.
I appreciate that.
That's
so kind, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to let people all across the world know the truth. And, you know, that's what we're all about, is putting the truth out there, right?
Amen. I think, who we losing? Is Stephanie still here?
I am here.
Okay, because I saw a message saying, call me back.
Oh, that was a second ago.
Okay.
Yes, and
All right.
I was able to get back in.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
good stuff. Okay, great. All right. So, again, apologies. We had two different shows lined up this week. First, we had a woman by the name of Sheila Ekrat who was going to speak for her son. And unfortunately, it turns out that she can't be with us. I'm not about to say why, but she can't be with us on the show. And then we had, last minute, we got another guest right up until the last minute yesterday, before they were able, they told us that they had to pull out. They weren't able to facilitate the show today because of working commitments, etc. And so at the very last minute, I put a call out to my roundtable team, only in the hope that maybe one or just the other might respond. And I cannot believe the response from all of you to say, hey, let's do this. Christine, Patrick, Yolanda, Dee, who may well still join up and be with us, Stephanie, and even from her bedside, TJ, Therese Gallagher. So again, thank you all for being with us. One of the things that I wanted to do with this particular show today was look back on recent issues, look back on some particular cases, talk about some particular things that we were having a problem with. And one of the issues that we were really having a difficulty with back then was qualified immunity. So later on in the show, we're going to talk about the qualified immunity and questions relating around that. But I first wanted to deal with the issue. I asked all of my audience. I asked all of my team members, my roundtable team, to consider this. What is the difference between a prosecutor or a district attorney and a civilian in perverting the course of justice? Because if you and I were to withhold evidence or lie on oath or anything else like that, we stand a very good chance of going to prison. At the very least, we will be prosecuted. And based on our level of integrity and character, the judge and jury will decide what sort of a sentence that we would get. So how much more should somebody in an official capacity, someone who is in office, someone who has a responsibility, somebody whose integrity should be way above ours, how much more should they be held accountable if they breach or break those very same rules and laws that we're expecting to abide by? So,
can I read my answer that I gave you yesterday?
Yeah, you go, Yolanda.
I said the penalty should be harsher for those who study, practice, and are sworn to uphold the law.
And absolutely. So, the reason I asked that question was, most of you may well have seen in the Philadelphia Inquirer, which was, and the story actually came out at the beginning of this year. It was in January 2019, when it spoke about the case of Robert Outlaw, who had spent 15 years in prison for the September 2000 murder of Jamal Kelly in East Germantown. And the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office handed over the police investigatory file on the case. In it, Outlaw's lawyers found what they believed was critical evidence, a letter from a witness to a police detective discussing his expectation of leniency in exchange for putting together a speech for Outlaw's trial, and police paperwork indicating a caller had left a credible tip pointing to a different suspect. Now, what that tells me is, when they were handing over the file, they actually didn't remember that this documentation was in there. Right? And while his defense lawyers was going through all of this paperwork, they uncovered this document. Now, when you bear in mind that Robert Outlaw has spent 15 years in prison for a murder, that these documents and paperwork suggest he may well not have... Isn't that not the same sort of perverting the course of justice that some of us would have been held accountable for? I don't know who wants to go first. Patrick, let me bring you in.
Yes, I'm here.
So, what's your opinion of this?
My opinion is that the standards are completely different. In fact, we could even say that they're introverted when it comes to an official officer as opposed to just a civilian. I agree with Yolanda. Officers, prosecutors, judges should be held to a higher standard of the law. And really, this is what aggravates me so much about this, Kervin, is that when people present this, that they should be held to a higher standard, we're often looked at as anti-police or anti-law or what have you. But it's really common sense to me that an officer should be under a greater requirement than to uphold the law that they have sworn, taken a constitutional oath to uphold. And I think that this type of abuse is rife throughout our justice system. I mean, I think you can go into any precinct, any department, any county, and you're going to find pretty much the same things. And if you remember, those departments that have been audited, what comes to mind is the one in Missouri. In every department that has been audited, they found these types of discrepancies in every one. So that shows me that this problem is a lot more widespread than what is previously believed.
Let me just bring in Christine a minute, because this is actually not too dissimilar to your case. You're in prison 14 and a half years later. You actually find documented, sort of doctored documents from the fire service. Tell us, just explain that to us again, please.
So it was probably year 14, 15. We put in a federal subpoena for the ATF to get the original fire documentation because they claimed that an accelerant was found, but they couldn't identify it. And I believed it could be identified if we looked at the test data. When we received that file, we discovered the original report, which was not presented at trial, that claimed that no accelerant had been found in my child's bedroom.
So the bottom line is, those that were prosecuting you were fully aware that there was evidence suggesting that their investigation direction was wrong. Because bearing in mind, let's just take it back. 2 hours, within 2 hours of your child dying and you're still at the hospital, police arrive at the hospital and tell you A, it's arson, and B, it's somebody known to the family. Now, based on the document that was altered and doctored, how soon after the fire was that document or that report put together? What was the date on it?
That report was put together 2 months after my arrest, stating that an accelerant had been found in my son's bedroom, but that they couldn't identify it.
And the document that said that there was no accelerant, when was that? What was the date of that? What was the difference in date?
The difference, it was actually prepared on the same day. We just never saw it.
So the bottom line is, what we're talking about is the district attorneys, the prosecutorial system, right, being fully aware that there is information, evidence, facts, reports that suggests someone didn't do what they claimed that they are doing, but they go ahead with the prosecution. They go ahead with the prosecution and they ruin that individual's life. They ruin it in such a way that they cannot take that back. You cannot get those years back. You know, whether it's Mark Clements, Jimmy Dennis, or Corey Wise, or you can't get those years back, but you're fully aware that the evidence that's being presented to convict somebody of being guilty of a criminal offense is untrue, and the probability that the individual did not commit the offense is closer to the truth, but you hide it. So why should, because I need to go back to this, because answer me this question, because you guys know it better than me. Is this what they refer to as qualified immunity? Is it qualified immunity that's protecting them in this? Anybody answer, please. Is it the qualified immunity that's protecting the prosecutors and the district attorneys in this particular incident, where they have doctored, concealed, obstructed, lied? Is it qualified immunity that's protecting them at this moment?
If I could answer that.
So.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, with when we come to prosecutors and judges, qualified, there's no qualified immunity, as I understand it, for those people. But there are other shields that judges and prosecutors can be brought up on. With the qualified immunity, and we talked about this a little bit last week, is that the language is so vague that there are always workarounds for officers to claim qualified immunity. It's supposed to be, and the word that is vague, and that is a word that you see throughout the definitions of qualified immunity are reasonable, and that word in itself is such a vague term that you have courts and judges ruling on that, I believe, errantly, giving qualified immunity to officers who actually do not qualify for qualified immunity. And if someone else could speak on it, I'm sure there are others that know much more than I do about it.
I would like to jump in here. So in order to talk about qualified immunity, I really wanted to look it up and get an idea of where it originated from. And of course, it originated with the executive office, but it's really interesting in how they qualify what it means. And like you said, Patrick, it's vague and arbitrary at best, and it leaves a lot to interpretation. But what we have here is qualified immunity is it immunizes official acts only when undertaken in good faith. Both forms of immunity seek to balance the protection of private citizens' rights and the substantial social costs of imposing liability on public officials. So then I ask myself, what is good faith? Okay. And then we get into good faith, another arbitrary kind of vague idea of what we think of as truth, honor, justice, and whatnot. Good faith is honest intent to act without taking an unfair advantage over another person or to fulfill a promise to act, even when some legal technicality is not fulfilled. So really quickly, an example of that is if police had a search warrant and they go in, they gather evidence. They come to find out later that technically the search warrant was not legal. It hadn't gone through. Maybe the judge hadn't signed it, but the evidence is still admitted because the police officers acted in good faith under the assumption that the search warrant was indeed legal. So we come back to, oh God, where was I going with this? Okay, somebody jump in while I get back my thoughts here. I had something going on here, but this is the reason why I wanted to get into the thing. Oh, where qualified immunity started. It was Harlow and Fitzgerald in 1981, and that had to do with presidential aides being sued. They didn't think that these people should because of their positions to serve the president. They felt like this qualified immunity should be given to the presidential aides because of their position to serve the president. So this is everything that we're talking about. And the courts have an automatic prejudice when a cop comes in and maybe you got a speeding ticket or whatnot, because they have sworn to uphold the law, and this is what we're arguing, everybody's saying that this shouldn't be, and I agree, that the courts are automatic, giving them the consideration that they're telling the truth over the person coming in to fight whatever it is that's being said.
But for me, the definition is wrong, because the definition is what the definition is supposed to protect them for is if they've made a mistake. If somebody makes a mistake in carrying out their duties in an official capacity, I could understand that, and we've talked about this often enough when we talk about, guys that are killed by cops, etc. And we turn around and we say, well, okay, supposing the cop was to turn around and say, sorry, I made a mistake. I thought he was reaching for a gun. I panicked and I offloaded my weapon, and then I found out he was pulling out his phone, right? When he upholds that and says, right, I made a mistake. Sorry, go ahead. But
they can do that, and the reason they get away with a lot of this is it comes back down to the evidence trail.
No, but the point is they don't do that. They don't do that. What they actually do is they then criminalize the individual that they've just killed, plant a gun on him or plant a gun anywhere near him, and then make out that he was trying to kill them first, which is why they killed him. Now, my point being is if somebody has made a mistake in an official capacity, whether it's presidential, law enforcement, prosecutors, judge, whatever, right? You've made a genuine mistake. And you say, you know what, I'm qualified immunity so that they're not sued and there's not a public expense put against the state. I get that. I understand that. And I think that's a fair argument. But we're not talking about mistakes here. We're talking about people that maliciously plot and conspire to convict innocent people or bury evidence that can acquit innocent people in the deliberate attempt to falsify a conviction where a conviction is not necessary. Now, that's not what that qualified immunity was introduced for.
It's the abuse of those laws and those rules that say it's you, not us, no matter what, that we are struggling with. That's where qualified immunity has been manipulated and morphed into this evil thing where no matter how human a person is, if they're wearing a uniform, they're exonerated from being human.
We're just getting you a bit muffled at the minute, Yolanda. I'm not sure if your Wi-Fi is pretty strong where you are. We got most of that, but we are losing some of it.
And also, I think it needs to be pointed out that when Christine, I believe it was Christine, was talking about warrants, is that we're talking about warrants, not just, I think when we hear warrant, we think of a home, a police coming into your home, but it could be them going into your phone. It could be them going into your car. And for these types of improprieties, many of these officers are getting qualified immunity for it. So when we're talking about a problem that is not much talked about, but is pretty prevalent throughout our judicial system, our law enforcement system.
Going back to Christine. Christine, you talked about how you were able to challenge the qualified immunity in your case. Tell us a bit more about that, please.
Well, in truth, my prosecutor claimed that he had never seen that original report. He trusted the fire experts that delivered the evidence to him, and that's what he went forth on. So while I can pierce qualified immunity and say that these fire experts are to be held accountable, in order to prove accountability, I have to prove that they had malicious intent. So if I can't physically prove that, then it doesn't matter if they have qualified immunity or not. I can't hold them accountable.
And here lies our problem. Remember on last week's show, I said this. If the individual that falsified the documents cannot be held accountable, then there must be somebody that signs him off or her off. There has to be somebody accountable. It's unfair to turn around.
There should be.
There has to be. The department head, the head of the department's head, the head of that department's head's head. Whoever that is, right? Somebody has to be held accountable, right? Because otherwise, well, it's not otherwise. It is evident. We are witnessing prisons filled with innocent people. We are witnessing streets paved with innocent blood. We are witnessing innocent, unarmed individuals shot down and killed while law officers lie and then get away with qualified immunity. We are seeing people sent to prison on falsified statements and evidence. There was a case that I was reading where the person deliberately lied. And I've just lost it now. And I had it the other day, and I remember I said to myself I was gonna bring this up. But when people are found to be lying, when it's been proven that they're lying, and especially if the district attorneys, because let's just get it straight. When we go back and we look back on the Central Park 5 related issue and see just how corrupt that entire investigation was from top to bottom, and again you had even the journalist on the When They See Us movie. He said when he was first writing about this, he knew it didn't make sense, but chose not to challenge it. So if he could see that it didn't make sense and chose not to challenge it, Surely those sophisticated, intelligent individuals that the state pays to govern law and order in those states would have read those reports before going ahead with the prosecution and saying, hang on a minute, this don't quite add up. Somebody has to be accountable. TJ has said, abolish qualified immunity. Abolishing qualified immunity is something that I think that we all agree with. But how would we go about abolishing qualified immunity? Because for me, a qualified immunity should not be something that law enforcement officers could use to help them escape prosecution when they are as guilty as hell. Somebody please respond. Anybody?
Okay, I'll go.
I would say that we need to go in and create new legislation under that qualified immunity that says there will be accountability. So unless we start working towards changing those issues, I mean, I certainly don't see us abolishing qualified immunity, because some immunity needs to be in place for our law enforcement officials. We place a higher trust on them, and so I think they should have some form of protection. However, if they do something blatantly wrong, they should be held to the same standards that I am. So if we create accountability issues, that's a way to attack it.
That's absolutely right. But here's the thing. I don't think, and I've just said it a short while ago, I don't think a qualified immunity should be totally banished, because I understand when you are working in an official capacity, right? We're human. We make mistakes. But only when you hold your hand up and you admit to that mistake should qualified immunity take part. Because up until then, you are committing an offense. You are lying. You are perverting the court of justice. You are trying to convict an innocent individual, or you're trying to cover up a crime. So all of those things says to me that you need to be treated the same way a civilian who was committing a crime would be treated. Arrested, charged, tried, and a jury convicts. Full stop. Qualified immunity should not allow you to lie, bend the truth at the expense of an innocent individual. And that's what qualified immunity has been used for right now. Unfortunately, that's what it's been used for. It was used in its simplicity with Christine. It was used with every other case that we're witnessing at the minute, and people are holding up like their little trump card. It's almost as if an officer can go into any situation knowing that no matter what he does or how he does it or what the outcome is, he's covered.
That's exactly right. That's exactly, we've been talking about this for weeks, is that, it's when you look at what the good and honorable reason for qualified immunity, I'm with you. There are times when that would come into play, but when you have it where it's a part of a much larger issue that I'm sure that we're going to get into, is we have jails, and we talked about this last week as well. We have jails and prisons that private people who have built prisons that have deals with the state that they have to be kept at a certain occupancy. So when you look at qualified immunity and how it is not enforced correctly, you look at the end result is more prisoners, which is in America. This is the thing. We have 10,000 people are wrongfully convicted in this country every year since 2000, and this study was done in 2014. So that's every year. 4.1% of inmates on death row are innocent. That comes out to 11 out of 250 people on death row are innocent. And since 1973, we've had at least, studies say, 340 people that have been executed wrongfully. So it's a part of a much bigger problem in that prison is for profit now. When we go into courts, whether it's on a speeding ticket or a murder charge, that court is against us. Whether it's not subjective, it's not objective. It's not. We're not going into a fair hearing. We're going into a place where DAs and judges and officers know each other and have relationships with one another. So again, it's a part of a much bigger problem, the qualified immunity question, I believe.
Hey, let me just bring in Christine here, because out of all of us, well, I have spent some time in prison here in the UK, but not in America. Christine has spent 17 years behind bars. What is your opinion on this prisons for profit system that you have going on in America?
It's absolutely true. I tell everyone when they're talking about prison reform, you need to follow the money. They are charging huge amounts of money for our families for phone calls. They charge for video visits. They charge exorbitant amounts for commissary. I was appalled when I got out and saw my favorite deodorant was $1, and I was paying $6 on commissary for it. Wow. But everything there is privatized. So it's continual poop, because the private companies are making money, but our prisons are getting paid to house an offender for a year. So if that person comes in with a mental health problem or a drug problem and they're released within a couple months and they can't keep up with parole or probation, then they're going to violate and come back, and they'll get paid again for another whole year. So they're getting paid twice in that 1 year for that one person. And they just keep cycling them back. There is no rehabilitation. We are not trying to set people up to succeed. We want them to keep the money flowing in.
And so therefore the prisons are being constantly overfilled in order to maintain the profit margins that the bodies, the organizations, the companies that own them. Correct?
Correct.
Do you know, just a number to throw in there. Since 1978, in 1970, in federal and state prisons, we had 196,000 inmates. After 2010, 1,570,000 inmates. And in just 40 years' time, we have a 700% increase in our prison population.
Sorry, I'm just looking something up a minute. Somebody else come in, just 1 second.
Well, I would tell you to take a look at our prison jobs, because I can make a prison uniform for $1 a day, and they're going to take that uniform and sell it to another prison for $15.
Wow.
So they're making huge profits because they're barely paying prisoners to do the work for other private prison companies.
Wow. Okay. Bear with me a minute. I'm just okay.
And when we talk about these contracts that these private prisons have with states, I was shocked to learn that these contracts state that the state can be sued by these private prison builders if their occupancy isn't kept at 70%. And that just seems, I was riding down the street the other day from work, and I was a cop pulled behind me, and I just began thinking as he was following me, where did these quotas come in at? We would think peace officers just out there looking for people doing things that are wrong, but you have officers that each month they have a quota that they have to fill. I think that works heavily against the population.
Okay, so hear this. The two largest private prison companies alone have spent $35 million on lobbying and campaigning contributions to state and local officials since 1989. Evidently, it was money well spent. The number of prisoners housed in private facilities has jumped 1,600% since 1990, a year after they started lobbying. Right? By buying favor with the right politicians, private prison companies have been able to secure everything from lucrative government contracts to harsher laws to guarantee a steady stream of inmates for their facilities. These companies turn our tax dollars into lucrative business that hauls in $3 billion a year. Wow.
It's systemic
Wow.
injustice. It's
Wow.
amazing. It's where everything originates. It's money and power, right there.
It's called legalized slavery.
And you
So-
wonder why people have qualified immunity. That's to keep everybody exactly where they're at because they're benefiting. And you said it before, Kerbin. You talked about the individual going up against these people, and that's the deal. It's the old adage: you have time, quality, or cost, and they're not quality. That's for sure. They just want to keep things the way they are because it benefits them. So the more we get together and the more we talk about it, we are becoming less of an individual and more of an entity ourselves, and that's where we're going to change this.
So we were talking about some of the wordings that was being used on his qualified immunity. And the word that kept cropping up over and over again was reasonable. Right? And I think, Stephanie, you challenged that word through the dictionary. Sorry, go on.
Right. Oh, yeah, no. Well, if you just look at the word and break it down, it's able to reason. You know, you don't need a definition.
Nope.
And then you look at what is reasonable. Yeah, we talked about this last week.
And the question has to be is, when you look at some of the evidence that we're talking about here now, even with the first case that I mentioned on Robert Outlaw, where the evidence has been held, he's spent 15 years in prison for a murder that he didn't commit. And they're now finding out that the police had paperwork indicating another caller had called in with a very credible tip pointing to a totally different suspect. When we talk about some of the other things that we already know of, where individuals, where there is no... And again, you know, the Central Park 5 is probably the biggest case out there right now at the moment. I'm bearing in mind that there was no... And I said this when I was at the... Homeless World Cup up in South Wales in Cardiff 2 weeks ago, and we were doing the Cardiff 5 case. The cases between the Cardiff 5 and the Central Park 5 were so similar. No forensic evidence attaching any of those that were arrested and charged, tried and convicted. No forensic evidence whatsoever, even though forensic evidence was available. No fingerprints, even though fingerprints was available. No witnesses to point them out, even though witnesses were available. Well, not so much the witnesses on the Central Park 5, because there was no witnesses apart from the guy that did actually do the crime. But there was witnesses for the other guys to say that they didn't do that. They weren't there. But when you look at that depth of conspiracy, that depth of false tale-telling, that false representation of law, that false representation of the integral authority that is law and order, that is set up there, precedented above us to keep, you know, our country running in a... I mean, this thing, law and order, this law enforcement, this trial and courts and judicial system that we're talking about is meant to be the one thing that differentiates between right and wrong. It's the one thing that's meant to hold us in our place so that we know that, you know, this is the way going forward, and anybody that crosses that line, there's a punishment and there's a consequence for. It's almost biblical. It's almost biblical in its conception. But yet it's been mishandled and misused at such a high level with no fear of consequence. It's very similar to a child who is living with, and we see this all over the place now, where you've got young kids who are growing up violent, carrying guns, who their parents are afraid of them. And those children live with no fear of consequence because there's nothing that their parents feel that they're able to do to them. And we see the effect it has on those children as they grow up into a society that is not as lenient or negligent or in fear of them as much as their parents are. But yet this is what we're allowing to happen to the judicial system that's supposed to ride over us all. Do we not realize the damage that's been done to that very institution that's meant to uphold the very thing that we're meant to all be standing for? Am I making any sense here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we got to go back to when we talk about qualified immunity and that word reasonable. We had Jamarian Robinson in Tuskegee,
Yes.
who was shot 76 times. Is that reasonable? Okay. I think he was in his car at the time, but he was shot 76 times, arms, head, limbs dislocated or separated from his body. That's how much he was shot. We have Willie McCoy out of Vallejo, California, shot 55 times while he slept in his car, and shot 55 times in 3.5 seconds. And these officers they're taking this into court, and courts are deeming this reasonable. That's a problem.
It's a huge problem. You got John Crawford, who was shot in 3.2 seconds of the officers walking into the Walmart because of, what do they call it, swatting. Isn't it? The swatting was the new trend at the time that he got caught up in. But when we look at how this qualified immunity has been mistreated, has been misused, has been misrepresented for the sake of covering up, right, criminal activity by the law enforcement officers and the judicial system that's meant to uphold the law. Surely it's time that they review what this qualified immunity stands for and what it represents, and adapt it to be what it was supposed to be. Because, you know, Stephanie mentioned at the beginning, when in looking into this qualified immunity, it was first raised to support presidential workers who are doing work on behalf of the president, the presidency, and the nation, right? And I suppose you could understand. But let me just get this, because the one thing that I never got from that, Stephanie, and maybe you might be able to help me out. When did that then get extended to law enforcement officers if it was started with presidential workers?
Because it started with the executive immunity, which pertains to our president. So it just kind of blanketed out there, and I don't have the specifics here right in front of me. But because they are presidential aides, that put them in an official capacity. So they just kind of added that to police, and I'm sure that there's other cases that could support that. I just looked up the word reasonable. I'm all about what words mean because people can use them for all different purposes. So it's really important that we have the idea of what it is. It's having sound judgment, fair and sensible. So we come back to reasonable. So there was the case that I just quoted, the Harlow, the one that started with the qualified immunity. And it said in there and made a little adage that the court system can look at the mental state of a police officer. So people, if they really understood how arbitrary our laws are and how the language is used, you can make anything you want it to almost. And I feel like it's a lot of laziness, and it comes back down to that individual up against this huge entity, and it's laziness. If you don't do anything, you're going to keep and stay where you are. It's about power. It's about money.
Okay, let me. I want to break this down this way. I'm going to bring Christine back in a minute. So, going back to your particular case. So here you were, right? You've lost your son. The police are now convinced that it was arson and it was somebody known to the family that committed it. Within 5 days, you are arrested and charged with the murder, right? I want you to talk me through what was happening during the questioning at the police station as they were trying to get you to admit that you would start. What was their attitude? What was their conduct? What facts were they laying down in front of you to get you to believe that they had some sort of a case? Because I know you never pleaded guilty, but they must have been trying to impress upon you that if you pleaded guilty, it'd be better for you. What was the case that they were laying down in front of you that gave you the impression that they felt that they were confident in getting a conviction?
Well, at first, they kept talking to me about insurance. They thought I was getting some kind of a life insurance payout or a home insurance payout. And once I realized that that's what they thought, I was like, no, I'm, a single mom. I work, I go to school. I do not have any kind of insurance on anything. I didn't even have it on my car. So then they switched it over. Did I have a boyfriend who didn't want my child around, and they needed to come up with some kind of reason that I would do this? And I was like, no, there's nothing like that. I don't have a boyfriend. I don't date like that. And then it came down to, they said that I failed a polygraph test and I just needed to confess. I said I absolutely wasn't doing that. I wanted to see that polygraph. I didn't believe it. Of course, they never ever produced that polygraph so it could be examined by anybody else. And then they came in and offered me a plea agreement to do, they would dismiss the murder if I pled guilty to the arson, and they would give me 15 to 7.5. And they said, of course, that's in your best interest, because if you go to court, you could get life.
So was there any point while they were piling that sort of pressure on you, did you actually think that you might be better off just complying with part of what they were asking for, even if not the murder, at least the arson?
Honestly, at that time, I didn't know that I was pregnant. And so had I have known that, then yes, there would have been more pressure to comply. But at that moment that they were applying all that pressure, I had nothing. I literally lost everything. The most important thing to me, my son, Tony. I had lost all my household possessions, my home, everything. So I felt like I've got nothing to lose. I'm not going to say I did something that I didn't do.
And that must have been that must have made them mad, more angry.
Absolutely. So the treatment in jail got worse. The way they talked to me got worse. They filed paperwork asking for life imprisonment. My public defender come in and told me that, he thought they were going to try to seek the death penalty, and did I have anything I wanted to share with him? So at that moment, I felt like I had no one on my side except my family. Even my court-appointed attorney was working for them.
Wow. I mean, when you imagine you're a young single mom that's just lost one child in a fire, you're pregnant, expecting another one, and the probability is, the eventuality was that your child was going to be born in prison if you got sentenced. The pressure to give in or to fight, whichever one that you chose to feed on, was what got you through this, right?
Absolutely. But
here's the thing.
Having gone through that, having experienced that, I understand why people cave. I understand why people tell them whatever they want to hear, because you just want it to stop. It's excruciating what they put you through.
We talked about the Cardiff 5 case earlier on, and when I did the interview with Michael Sheen and down at the Homeless World Cup 2 weeks ago, they asked us what happened at the Court of Appeal. Now, there was a particular evidential tape of the interrogation carried out by the South Wales Police on Stephen Miller, the one that was eventually used to convict all the others. And they had interviewed him for 72 hours without rest, without food, without water, and with some kind of shoddy lawyer, house-trained, just sat by the side of him, not interfering, not interrupting, not objecting, and not supporting Stephen in any way, shape or form. And Stephen Miller in response to their allegations over those 72 hours, had denied being part of the murder 382 times. And what they did was they continually showed him photographs, bearing in mind that this was his girlfriend that they were accusing him of killing. They kept showing him photographs of her mutilated body, of her almost decapitated head, of her dismembered breasts, and they kept shoving those photographs in him over and over and over and over again. And you can hear all of this on the interrogation tape. But during the trial, they played the interrogation tape in excerpts. Do you understand what I mean? In little snippets, a bit here and a bit there, and they used it to convict him. But at the Court of Appeal, they played, and I think it was tape 82 or whatever it was, they played the entire tape, or tape 13 or tape, I can't remember what number tape it was offhand, but they played the entire tape uninterrupted. That particular portion of the interrogation where they hounded him, and you were counting, and his appeal judge, his lawyer, barrister, stood there and was counting every time he said no, he didn't do it, from one hand to the next hand and back down to the next hand, back down to the next hand, and every time he said no, he didn't do it, over and over again. He kept the count, so he kept the jury and he kept the people that were in the gallery up to date with the count of him continually saying, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it. 308. The one time, while his head was on the table, he was absolutely shattered, and it was up to after the thousandth or so time that he'd asked for water or something to eat, or to go to the toilet, which they wouldn't let him do. He went, all right, yes, I did it. And that was, they charged him. And the very next thing that came from his mouth was, I didn't do it. 382 times he said he didn't do it. One time he said they did. They charged him. Now, I know the Central Park 5 was something quite similar in the way that the guys were interrogated, beaten, left without proper appropriate adults to support them, etc. You had the one where his father came in and was forced to tell him to agree to this because it would be better for him. And we saw lives destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. Yet, the entire investigation, all of the people, every single one of them needs to be held accountable for the role that they played in convicting and presenting false evidence that was to lead to the conviction and sentencing of those innocent men. But not just them. If we don't start making the word I'm looking for has just slipped me by now, examples of those who are caught red-handed falsifying evidence and trying to get away with it, we're going to struggle to bring this truth out. So, I suppose, Stephanie, how do we go about making this qualified immunity that acts as a shield, a barrier, that protects the innocents from getting to the truth? How do we go about approaching this as a way forward in order to try and bring about some change? Just even to this.
Well, first of all, I would say we're doing it right now by all of us getting together. We're talking about it. We're questioning what it's used for, why it came about, and how it's affecting people in individual cases. That's our justice system that our country is put together to protect us, and that's not what it's doing. And it comes down to evidence and facts and police investigating themselves and putting stories out there, narratives. And so that's something as individuals that we have to fight against, that we don't have the tools, the wherewithal or the know-how to do when we are just trying to fight for our rights. And that's where all the organizations, the speaking out and everything else, because it's fighting this huge entity, this power that's been in position for so long. And qualified immunity, I believe, is going to be we're going to just peck away at it to get it more defined and more fair, which is what it was originally intended for, by going at it individually with each one of our cases. And the only way we can do that is by getting evidence, by presenting the facts and being vigilant in showing what the truth really is, because that's where they get us is right after a crime. Well, it's not even determined a crime. An incident has happened. We're in the deficit. We're in shock. We're unable to step forward. This isn't their realm of what we know how to do in our lives. This is something these people do for a living. This is their profession. And so when, say, my brother and, the police investigate themselves, everything happened, and it's the lack of evidence when they investigate themselves that these things start coming up, the qualified immunity. It's kind of a blanket thrown out there to cover a lot of different elements there. And so to me, I just keep coming back down to the fact that we need evidence, we need the facts, and we need the people like us that are going to get together and help other people in the same situations who are blown away by this. Their whole lives are altered in a moment. And yet we have this whole system set up, and it's almost against us, when in truth, it's all about us, and it was for us. You look at the Constitution, yeah. That's the truth.
So we talked about Robert Outlaw in as much as this withholding the evidence after 15 years. Let me bring you your attention to the case of Kevin Cooper for a moment. California is set to execute death row inmate Kevin Cooper for a brutal murder that occurred in 1983. Listen up very carefully. Cooper was sentenced to death in 1985 for the brutal murder of a family in the Chino Hills suburb of Los Angeles. Law enforcement insists that Cooper killed Douglas and Peggy Ryan, their 10-year-old daughter Jessica, and 10-year-old Chris Hughes, who was staying with the family the night of the murders. There was one survivor, a then 8-year-old Josh Ryan, who had his throat cut and was left for dead. Cooper at the time had escaped from a minimum security prison and was hiding out at a nearby residence at the time of the murder, and police focused their attention on him as the chief suspect in the case. When he was finally arrested, police claimed that evidence, including a bloody footprint, a drop of blood, and a piece of cigarette paper, tied him to the crime scene. Catch this. But when Josh Ryan recovered from his injuries, he stated that it was 3 white or Hispanic men that attacked and killed his family, and that Cooper was not involved. This is the victim who had his throat cut. This started a chain of events that now indicate a startling 30-year cover-up. A 30-year cover-up and blatant falsification of evidence by law enforcement and a prosecutor's office in the case. This includes the fact that the blood at the crime scene did not belong to Cooper and contained the DNA of 2 people. But now there is no sample left because it was consumed during the testing process. Now, this is a man that the judges have deemed to be innocent who is still sitting on death row, and there are no consequences for those who have been involved in a 30-year cover-up that has left this man rotting in prison.
I'm familiar with this case. I watched a documentary of it, and I watched it very carefully. I watched it twice, in fact. All throughout the investigation, you could see where they were making things fit the scenario that they chose. And then they want to use the excuse that, well, most of the officers that were involved with it are either retired or dead, as a reason why they don't want to revisit this and do what's right by this man. But they forced the scenario. The entire investigation, you could see where they were forcing the scenario that it was this particular person who did it. And it was simply because of his color. They judged him by his look. They depicted him as an ape. a wild man, a wild caveman look. You know, he had this wildness in his eyes that made you fear for your life and you felt danger. You know, one officer was a big burly dude at the time. Well, I even felt intimidated by the way that he looked. He just looked dangerous. Really. You got him when he was asleep. So yeah, I don't know anybody who has perfect bed hair. So
not even a woman. Not even a woman. And I'm saying that in a very brave and courageous way.
Yeah, but so you grab him, you wrestle him up, you beat him up, you do everything that you want to do prior to showing him to the public, and you make sure that you present him in the worst way possible, so that everybody buys whatever it is that you're selling. And you got to remember, police officers are salesmen. They got to sell their story. A lot of them can't do it. But they do.
Yeah, here is part of the 103-page dissent from the judges at the circuit court when he went for his appeal. There is no way to say this politely. This is the judges. The district court failed to provide Cooper a fair hearing. The district court impeded and obstructed Cooper's attorneys at every turn. The court imposed unreasonable conditions, refused discovery that should have been made available as a matter of course, limited testimony that should not have been limited, and found facts unreasonably based on a truncated and distorted record. Public confidence in the proper administration of the death penalty depends on the integrity of the process followed by the state. So far as due process is concerned, 24 years of flawed proceedings are as good as no proceedings at all. The judges found that the prosecution and the sheriff's office destroyed, tampered, and hid from the defense significant evidence that the jury never heard. Finally, in a damning statement, the judges wrote, "The state of California may be about to execute an innocent man." Again, I say, wow.
And that's a judge, and that's a judge talking.
Wow. We have.
You know what? I'd like to direct a question towards Yolanda, if I could, Kervin.
Go ahead.
Yolanda, you were talking to us a few weeks ago, and about the work you were doing in Ohio, and you had mentioned something kind of in passing. You didn't elaborate on it, but you had said that we need to start activizing state by state to get some of these laws turned back or to create new laws. Can you talk to us a little bit about how we go about that?
First of all, you have to educate yourself on what the laws are in your state. A lot of us are transplantees. Me, I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, so I can look at it and be comfortable with what my perceptions are and what I'm learning. But a lot of people have moved from one state to another. But no matter where you are, learn your state laws, learn the laws that govern the police officers. And I must say this, and I cannot stress it enough. Learn the laws that govern the police officers on and off duty. They are two different things. On and off duty. You need to know those things.
Okay, let's quickly bring Stephanie in because she had something that she also wanted to bring in here just now. Steph, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Sorry, did I cut you? I hope I didn't cut you short then, Yolanda.
You did, but I'll forgive you.
Okay.
This time, no, Yolanda, that's exactly right. Finding out about these people and individually, just as an aside, a lot of police officers' records, if they've been disciplined in any way, get wiped clean in 2 years. So they want us to look at somebody who's called reasonable, but how do we know they're reasonable, if we don't know who they are? And that's just another thing. But again, this comes back down to economics. And I'm going to throw out a couple of trigger words like profiling and narratives. And this is one of the things to continue with our socioeconomic uprise in our justice system. They pick people who don't have the money to defend themselves. They pick people. They choose people that don't have the wherewithal to fight and the resources to stand up against what the narrative, what the story that they're putting out. And this is what we all keep saying, this same thing. So I have an example of that. It wasn't even that long ago. Now we're 4.5 years into after my brother was killed in March of 2015. And a year ago, I felt like something was missing. I've got all the documents, depositions, everything. And I was going through some of my case files, and I found a little yellow Post-it note that said, Tom Adair, just big quotes, my scribble, Tom Adair said Brian didn't have, and I thought, what the hell? Who's Tom Adair? I know everybody. I know the witnesses. I've gone through all this stuff. Who could that be? So I started looking who this guy was. And I didn't want to like interrupt his whole life or anything, but I found him, and he was really happy to talk to me. And he said, I am so glad I got to talk to your lawyers. And I testified. I gave him my witness testimony, and I said, well, I'm sorry, Tom, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he said, yeah, I was there for hours. Well, it turns out that he was called in. He was not seen originally as anybody with any kind of importance. So there's like one sentence that refers to him in the original investigation. And so even our attorney at the time didn't think it was a big deal. And we have a different attorney now. But so he was brought in to do a deposition, and there were 7 people there in the court recorder. And he said that he told him, and he'd been trying to tell everybody what his experience of that day was. It was paramount. And it wasn't just about the content of what he experienced in his witness testimony. It was about the fact that 64 pages, we found it at the court reporter's office, that had been left. It had been left there and not given to the new attorneys, both sides, the defense and prosecution. The city of Eugene and my family have both changed representation, but it was sitting in their office, 64 pages. He thought he was talking to our attorneys, very relieved and happy he was able to get his story out finally. And from apparently whatever it is he said, and it changed the whole narrative of the way we saw it happening. And we didn't get a good glimpse because all the cameras, audio and visual, except for the Bearcat, which you couldn't see, which is an armored vehicle, had malfunctioned 4 minutes before to 6 minutes after my brother was shot. And we're talking about multiple people there at the scene, police officers. And this one man who was well within 30 feet of my brother's front door had a completely different story about how it happened, and the timing was changed. And we're talking, this just happens. And I it's like when you hear conspiracy theory or, how does that happen? Oh, it was just a mistake. It's not. This really happens because people aren't doing their jobs. We get lulled into this idea that things are just the way they should be and we move forward. But I don't think people are really geared into action until something significant like having a brother killed affects us and how much it affects our lives. And then we wake up and then we start doing stuff. But to me, the more we get this information out to people and the more resources we can provide, and like Yolanda, finding out about these people, what we should know, the truth is illuminating. That's what we should be living by. So we need to continue to just work towards that. That's
okay.
My piece.
Absolutely awesome. Let's just bring in Christine very quickly. She has a suggestion on legislative issues. Come on, Christine.
I was just going to say, each state has an Innocence Project, and all of the legislative issues that I've worked on, I have worked with a representative from the Innocence Project because they have state policy experts. There's other groups out there, Witness to Innocence, Families Against Wrongful Convictions, Families Against Mass Incarceration. partnering with these groups will help bring more awareness, but you also have a whole group to try to tackle these issues.
Yeah. So when we talk, I mean, you know, with Yolanda, we've spoken many times about how we unite, how, you know, we're not just sitting down there with our own agendas, because that's the whole point of bringing all of you guys together, who are coming with your own different stories. I mean, Yolanda, her daughter was murdered by an off-duty police officer at a party where he shouldn't be carrying a gun and he shouldn't have been drinking alcohol in possession of a gun. But yet at the same time, there was no consequence for him, and that wasn't even called into question, despite the fact that it was his gun that killed Adacia Miller. Do you want to just come in there very quickly, Yolanda?
Yes. Yeah, there was a lot of things that was going wrong with the case involving my daughter. The police officer, his penalty was sitting at a desk for 2.5 months. He is still on the streets today. But as far as how do you change legislation, you have to first know the laws. Then you have to get in contact with people who are up and coming and hungry. I'm not going to say go on and deal with those old dogs that's already in office, because they're not trying to change anything. They got themselves in, they're good. But you need the people who want their job. You have to find you a attorney, and unfortunately it has to be an attorney who drafts your law in order for you to present it as a bill. You can talk with people as far as college professors. You know, most of them are practicing attorneys that's teaching law in college. You can get, if you can get in touch with a college professor who's willing to let his third-year students work on your project as part of their curriculum for their outside work that they have to do, then you can get free work. And you got the bright minds that's coming up, because third-year students are on their way to graduation, so they want to get this in, and they want to make sure that they make a name for themselves. So they're going to get it right. You also can get in touch with I don't know who's in the background with all that noise. You can also talk to your Congress people, your state representatives, because you need somebody to politically get your foot in the door that's going to actually listen to you. That's what's happening in Ohio. They're talking with Congress people. They're also talking with state reps, and they're tag teaming them so that nobody is ahead of the other person. And you got them both working on your agenda. And that's just what we have to do. We have to become politically involved. We can't just sit outside and say, these are the things that are happening, these things are wrong that are happening, we don't like them. We have to do something about it. You know, like I tell people, you got to be about it. You know, and you got to be about the business of getting justice.
You know, I'm going to say something that's slightly controversial. We have conversations here in the UK, and there's a lot of people who are anti-Trump, and I'm very anti-Trump. Trust me, totally anti-Trump. But Donald Trump is not to blame for all the problems that are in America right now. He's only the only thing that I can hold him at fault for is allowing them to continue under his presidency. You understand where I'm coming from with that now? Because for me...
True, I believe that.
Right? Qualified immunity wasn't introduced by Donald Trump. Police being allowed to get away with police brutality wasn't introduced by Donald Trump. Wrongful convictions and judges and prosecutors getting away wasn't introduced by Donald Trump. These are legislative laws that have been in place for a long time. My issue is that there has been president after president that has presided over these rules and regulations that have not done enough to change them. And that's what we need to start fighting. We need to start asking the politicians, what is your stance on this? Because I'm not voting for you until I understand where you stand with this. You know, where do you stand with people that have got a justified case for an appeal that are still being swept under the carpet. Where do you stand when the evidence clearly points to misappropriation by local law enforcement officers who are continually getting away? Where do you stand when the evidence clearly suggests that an innocent individual has been killed, shot dead, and a family left to mourn? Where do you stand with these things? Because until you know where these people stand with these things, then you shouldn't be voting for them. And the bottom line is, come the next round of elections, people are going to start voting. But what are you voting for? Who are you voting for? The people that you're voting
The
for.
lesser of two evils.
What? I've said this many times before.
It is. It's the lesser of two evils, you know. And like I said before, I've had people ask me to run for different offices and whatnot, but I feel like I can do a lot right now where I'm at, and as far as this goes, it's not saying that I won't do it, and it's not saying that I may have to do it in order for myself to be able to help affect change. But right now, I'm more in the mindset of we need to recruit more people, you know, get these folks off of the bench, get these folks who are afraid to say something, do something, because they have someone else locked up. So they need to get a little bit smarter about it. When you talk to an officer, they come and say, "Can I have a conversation with you?" I don't care if they feel like it's illegal. Record it. They don't need to know, because I guarantee you, they're recording you. They are recording whatever they're talking to you about. You know, the audio will be really distorted when they say something, but whatever you're saying is going to come through crystal clear.
Absolutely.
So you better start recording them. Because when they come to you, when they threaten your loved one, when they call you and tell you if you speak to somebody or you go do something, we can make a phone call, because you remember your brother's locked up in such and such prison. He might get moved to one further away where you'll never be able to see him. You have to have that.
Absolutely.
You know, you have to do something with that pressure that they're putting on you. Stop being a victim.
Spot on, Yolanda. Let's bring in Patrick. I think Patrick wants to respond very quickly.
No. Thank you, Yolanda, for giving those points, and Christine, thank you very much. I will be contacting the Innocence Project. I think it's important to also point out that with Christine and with Stephanie, with Yolanda, with my case with Taylor Rock, anything that we found out, it wasn't they didn't volunteer that information. You know, we went through things and we found these discrepancies, and we made a stink about it, which is, you know, brought some attention to our loved ones' cases. But that's important to me is that if we don't become active, they're not just going to have a prick of conscience and start doing the right thing. The cover-ups will continue. The mass incarcerations, the erroneous incarcerations will just continue and expand. So it's really important to get involved. And I think, Yolanda, if I'm not mistaken, you're talking about, and also I declare now that you will run for office and win, or you should, because you got a lot of things that we need in this country. Here. You're absolutely. She really does. I like the way Yolanda fights. I'll say that, and then I'll get off Yolanda. I'm sorry. But you're saying get involved on a local level, correct?
Yes,
politically.
Definitely.
Right, okay. Can't you see Yolanda just wiping the floor with someone politically? I mean,
I'm telling you, heck yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Tear it up, Curtsy.
Come on, tear it up, Yolanda. He's thrown it back in your court.
You know what? I'd vote for her.
I've never seen Yolanda. I've never seen Yolanda stuck for words. Huh? I've never seen Yolanda stuck for words.
Well, I got the chance to meet Yolanda at a retreat up at the Columbia Gorge, and I'm telling you that she came all the way from Ohio, and to the energy and the presence and your intelligence and knowledge this is it. You're all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've got to get a picture with you. Wait a minute. We're getting selfie here. I'm so serious. I did. So yeah, it's people like you that are making a difference. And it's fantastic.
You know,
It is fantastic.
we had a real agenda here today in talking about qualified immunity versus mental health versus prosecutorial misconduct. But we've not really moved from qualified immunity for the whole show, and I'm really glad that we haven't, because it is something that majority of people didn't actually understand was in existence, or the level of existence it was being used, until we started to discuss it last year. And we've now had several opportunities to witness how this qualified immunity helps keep this judicial system that is corrupt to carry on being as corrupt as it is. And now that we're beginning to understand and break down what this qualified immunity is, our hope is that our audience who are listening to this will start taking some of the conversations that we're having here on Issues Today, on this round table debate and discussion, and taking it to their local politicians, taking it to those local surgeries, taking it to those local places where their state council or their state representative is vying for votes and saying, here, I'm here for you, and saying, hey, well, if you're here for me, what's going on here? What's this all about? Because unless you start uniting yourselves to fight against this thing that's holding you all down, that's keeping all your loved ones incarcerated while they're innocent, that's allowing officers to roam the streets after they've innocently killed your innocently unarmed loved one, unless you're going to start fighting back with the same tools and resources that they are holding you down with, then they're going to continue winning this battle. Because until you start getting change and reformation in these legislations and laws and things that govern you, then you're allowing yourself to be governed by laws that don't actually support you. So here's our opportunity, guys. I was meant to start the show with, let's go make a difference. That was meant to be my opening slogan, commanded by Yolanda. People, and I'm not just talking about the round table, I'm talking about you, the audience, the listeners, the people that are listening into this show on all the various platforms that you're listening to. Let's make a difference. Let's not just sit down here and listen to each other speak, but let's leave the table of conversation and go out there in our communities and do something with it. Let us be responsible for trying to make a difference where we stand. Let us go into our communities and speak to the people that need to be spoken to, support those that need to be supported, and unite those that need to be united, and say, hey, we're in this together. If we fight this, it benefits us all, irrespective of race, class, or creed. It doesn't matter whether you're Hispanic and I'm black. It doesn't matter whether you're white and you're Indian. This benefits us all. If we get this right, we all benefit. Because at the minute, the bullets that are going through the guns of these law enforcement officers, they have no colour. They have no preference. They'll kill whoever stands in front of them. And they will convict anybody, as we've just heard, right, to keep those prisons for profits full. So it might not be you today, but it could be you tomorrow. Bearing in mind, when the racism issue hit the UK back in the 60s, it was blacks and Irishes that was being targeted. But here we are in the millennium, and it's the Eastern Europeans that are now being targeted here in the UK. And if you look at what's going on in America and see how the trend of racism keeps on evolving from one race to another, unless we get the people who are being separated by propaganda to unite for the cause that they will all benefit from, we're not going to win. So it's about us putting our personal issues to one side. It's about us putting our personal preferences to one side and saying, we're in this to win it. We're in it to win it. I want to go to Christine very quickly, because Denver has just stated that they're going to abolish these prisons for profit. What is your take on that?
I feel like they'll find another way to funnel those funds. I don't see anyone letting go of that much money, and prison is big profit. So I'm curious as to whether or not it's truly going to happen, and I'll be anxious to see where those companies go instead.
You see, the bottom line is they're still going to need to have their prisons filled. Here's the thing.
Exactly.
So I watch Witness and Universal are two of my favorite channels on Sky, right? I don't know how many of you guys watch Universal, but there's a couple of programs I do like to watch, and one in particular is For the People. Have you had that out in America yet? And it's a program about prosecutors and defense. It's all happening in the courts, but they just had.
I have not heard about that.
Oh, it's a new series that's on. In fact, it's season 2 at the moment. It's on Universal. It's called For the People, and so therefore you've got the prosecution, district attorney versus the defense lawyers, and they're two different groups, and they're both starring roles. And some of them can be quite friendly at times, and they kind of have. But the recent case that they just had, and I can't help but believing that some of these stuff that they're bringing to some of these new modern programs now are based on real life issues that have happened that can't properly be recorded or reported on, because that's what they were dealing with. They were talking about prisons for profit, where a judge was laundering money through an empty apartment, which he wasn't actually laundering. It was payment, because the woman who was renting the apartment, her brother ran a prison for profits. And so it turned out that over the last, how many period of time it was, that 95% of the people that had been convicted in his court had been sent to that particular prison. Now, I'm just wondering, if they was to do secret investigations onto all the judges that particularly sit on benches that have got harsh sentences or harsher sentences than normal, I wonder what they'll find. I wonder, would they find them sending out these guys to similar or the same prisons for profits? Are there any? Does anybody understand where I'm coming from with this? And if so, please jump in and bail me out.
I think they would find the same thing. I think that's what's so alarming about it. Everything that we've heard these past 5 years is that these are not isolated incidents. We're not seeing corruption in precincts and departments in isolated ways. We're seeing that it's widespread and pervasive, and that's what I think the importance of groups like this, especially this group. There's just something about this group that when we get into what can be done, I think that's where we are going to hit our stride is what can be done. I think the diversity of our group is quite different from anything else that I've seen. White, black, Native, you're in the UK, Curvin's in the UK, we're in the States. I mean, I just think we have officers and ex-officers and all these great people that are here to discuss these issues. And I think that we're going to hit our stride when we get out into the realm of doing something. And just to speak just very briefly about what Yolanda was saying, what Stephanie was saying, is about being activized and doing something, is what I find for myself is that the more involved I get, the better I feel, the more optimistic I feel about things, even though every story coming out is damaging. But the more that I get involved and the more that I think that's the way we frame going forward is getting people involved, the more, because I think people are disgusted with what they've seen out of the police department. I think we have that power of the narrative on our side for the first time, that large numbers of people have a mistrust of the police department these days. And as we go forward framing that, we've got to be clear that the more you do, the more you get out, the protests that you attend, whatever you do, the better you're going to feel about it.
As long as we remember that whatever we do in love, always do in love. Hate is such a wasted energy that if we was to retaliate with the very same hate that's been utilized against us, then we would end up being no different or no better than they are. Everything that we do in love. So love is a powerful tool to have when you're using it to fight for good, when you're using it in any respect. But yes, we have a great roundtable team that is eventually, I believe, going to make a difference. We're preparing to make a difference. We're discussing, we're debating, we're chewing over the fat, and what we're hoping we're doing here on this platform, utilizing you guys as an audience, is making sure that we are going in the right direction. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for you, and we're fighting for your loved ones as well. You know? So we've got about 10 minutes left. I just want everybody to have an opportunity to round up on where they feel that we need to be going forward, especially for the next roundtable, because this was an early call for a roundtable. It wasn't meant to happen today. Our next one is the first week of September. TJ will remind us where it is. Next week, we've got Tonya Brown on the show, but we'll talk about it in a minute. But I just want everybody to have an opportunity to round up how they feel about the stuff that we've discussed today and how we need to operate going forward. So let's start with you, Christine, shall we?
Well, I'm completely blown away and honored to be with all of these wonderful people sharing about important issues. I think I can't stress enough that if you get involved, if you start working, like Patrick said, I feel so hopeful and energized when I'm out there educating people, speaking to different groups. I've done police trainings in Illinois, which I think is an incredible program, and it gives them an opportunity to learn from me, but I also get to learn from them. And so I think if we keep reaching out to each other, we can create a solid group that can bring about some incredible change.
You know, from the moment I spoke to you, Christine, I felt absolutely that you was going to be able to make a huge difference as part of our roundtable team. And there's nothing that's happened since I've interviewed you and since you've made your debut here as your first roundtable show, that you're going to be tremendous going forward with this team and what you have to bring. So I take my hat off once again for the experience that you've had. Only you know the pain that you went through, but to see just how committed you are working for others who have been through similar things like you, you are definitely a credit to yourself and to everything that you represent. So fantastic work, Christine, and we are honoured to have you here as part of our roundtable team, and hopefully as often as you are available, you will be part of this team as long as you wish to be with it. It's an open, that's it. We want you. We need you. Your country needs you. Wrongful convictions need you. There's so much that you've got to bring that I believe that we are really going to be knocking on doors with your contributions. So thank you again. I also want to say something quite similar to Stephanie. I remember interviewing her a while back ago when we talked about her brother, Brian Babb. And when we interviewed her again, this time it was such a passionate show that I was totally captured by her sincerity and her honesty. And again, as me and Teresa have argued it out, it was her that invited Stephanie and not me. Okay, so let's get. See that I've put that right against Teresa. You see what I did there? But I just want to give you an opportunity.
No. Let me step in here a minute now. It was you that was suggesting it, boss, but you were doing it behind the, in the corner, behind. And I was at your saying please, and you even said pretty please.
Yeah, I did. So I was telling.
You were the one that instigated it. You made it look like I was being insubordinate.
I'm so flattered that both of you were talking about this. Now you're like arguing about who said it first. It's awesome. You guys are so funny.
But hey, here's a round it up for us, Stephanie. Your thoughts on what we've done so far, and where we're going to go forward from here.
Oh, it's inspirational. I think all of our information, Kervin, you've been, there's been something much greater than all of us individually can contribute, and you were able to put that together. So regardless of where that came from, it came from something out there, I'm sure of it. And this is where it's going to happen, man, right here.
Thank you very much, Steph. Patrick, again, from the very first time I interviewed you, sir, I must tell you that we made our connection. You made it known to me if ever I needed you to help in any way, you would be there. And you've been a man true to your word, an honest, sincere, and integral man, and a vital part of this roundtable team. And what you bring to it is invaluable. So again, I honor you also. But round up in a couple of minutes how you saw the show going today, what we talked about, and how you see us going forward.
Thank you, Kervin. It felt like an instant brotherhood when I first talked to you. And what's interesting about that is that it's been like that with every member of this panel. For me, I've just felt an instant connection. Stephanie, during your interview a couple of weeks ago, we were going crazy. Yeah. It was amazing. It was an amazing 2 hours. It really was. So
wow,
glad
thank
that you're
you.
here.
That's amazing to hear. It really is.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. We were going nuts. Christine, so happy that you're here. Of course, with everybody, I'm saddened about the circumstances that brought us all here. Most of us here, anyway. But I'm so very thankful that we're all here together. I think that we're going to do amazing things. I think we can't even imagine the things that this group is going to accomplish. And Kervin, you're amazing. You're amazing.
Something?
Yes, ma'am. But I wanted to get to you before.
If I could. You two are amazing, Patrick.
Well, thank you, Therese.
And you have been there consistently.
I am the coffee boy of the group, and I'm happy and honored to be the coffee. So Stephanie and Christina, let me know how many creams.
Not the coffee boy.
Let me know
That's
how many creams and sugars you're taking. I won't make a mistake, I promise. But you guys are great. I feel something very, dare I say, spiritual about this group. That we're going to accomplish something that we can't even imagine. So I just want all of us to be encouraged.
You are a huge, powerful part of this panel. Yeah.
And I wanted to finish real quick by saying, Therese, we miss you so much. I'm so glad to hear your voice. We missed you so much last week. It was so different without you. You're such a big part of everything. And I thank you and Kervin for this great platform that you've given all of us.
Okay.
Oh, you're wonderful. Thank you.
Lastly.
You're an inspiration.
Yeah. One sec, TJ. Lastly.
Definite inspiration. Yeah. And you're always there. Since I've taken my position, you've always been there. Always. And you're like Mama Bear there.
Right,
we're
running out of time. I need to bring in Yolanda very quickly.
So thank you, Patrick.
So Yolanda, the mama. I call her the mama of the roundtable team. She's Mama Bear. I'm not sure if she's there. Has she gone? She's been called to a call. Are you there, Yolanda? Well, we love Yolanda very much. She's obviously been called away again. She's sent in a message. She's been called away to another call. She's at work.
We love her.
But we love her dearly, and we're gonna do our honouring of Yolanda at the next round table. But I'm gonna leave the last words with you, TJ.
Oh, well, what a great, fantastic show it was today. Next week, we have Tanya Brown with us. The week after that, the boss is going on vacation, where he'll be pursuing his little blessings in life. I want to think.
I'm actually going into a prison to do a mentoring session with young men in prison next.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're making a difference, boss. And
that's part of the work that I do outside
you
of here.
rocked it again, boss.
Well, listen, you guys have all been absolutely awesome. This has been a great 2 hours. I believe that the audience have been held captive for 2 hours. It's been an absolutely informing show. I believe that we've brought light to the qualified immunity issue, which is what I really wanted to do today. And maybe going forward, we take the mental health and prosecutorial misconduct part of this qualified immunity forward into the next roundtable. But guys,
right, and Yolanda's back.
Yolanda's back. Yolanda, 1 minute roundup from you. What you think of the show so far for today, and how you see us going forward. Yolanda.
I'm here. I gotta go outside. It's kind of loud inside here.
Okay. Yeah, just a roundup from you, Yolanda.
I'd just like to say thanks to Christine for joining the team, and I'm very happy to be working with all of y'all. It helps to ground me and help me to think through the process of the things that I want to do and what I see as us moving forward. And I know that we're going to be a force to be reckoned with. We're going to be recognized throughout the United States as well as the UK for what we're doing, because we're doing something that people aren't doing. We're having that actual conversation, and we're being brutally honest with what we're saying. You know, we're not trying to sugarcoat it for anybody. No kid gloves are being used, and it has to be that way. And in our future, in the near future, I see somebody, if not coming to us, appointing us on some sort of team to get the changes made.
Wow.
Because we're educated. And I'm going to just speak that.
We all speak from its
existence.
Amen. Amen.
That's right.
Well, guys, let me thank you for an awesome two hours. It has flown by, and I'm sure the audience will agree. There's been an umpteen questions being thrown in here. I just haven't had much time to respond to many of them. But to all of you who have tuned in today and supported the show and have contributed to the comments, we thank you all for supporting us continuously. We look forward to being back here again next week when we've got Tonya Brown as our guest. The round table will be 2 weeks after that, when we shall formally, I believe, introduce Hillary Brown to the round table team, who is an immigration and civil rights and human rights lawyer here in the UK. We will officially indoctrinate her to the round table team. Until then, my name's Kervin Julian. This has been Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, and it's been an honour to be with your roundtable team guests, Christine Bunch, Stephanie Babb, Patrick Lane, Yolanda McNair, and the very honourable, my producer, TJ Teresa Posselt Gallagher. Thank you very much, and we're out of here. We've run out of time.